Welcome, dear people. Hello, and welcome to this keynote of our symposium, Ways of Water, Art, Activism, and Ecologies, which started earlier today. My name is Petra Kappas, she, her, and I'm here in my home office on Three Fires territory, colonially known as Ypsilanti, Michigan. And Three Fires territory is also where the University of Michigan is in Ann Arbor. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan in English and Women's and Gender Studies. I teach a queer feminist eco-arts class that is deeply influenced by the work of the speaker we get to welcome today, and many members of my class are here with us. Hi, everybody. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going here. If you have questions for Winona, please use the link to the Google form that is in the chat for you. Also, STAM's Gallery Director, Srimoyi Mitra, will be on after the talk for a moderated discussion. And now I will introduce our speaker. My own work in eco-arts and feminist work has been deeply marked by Winona LaDuke's powerful teachings, the breadth of her interventions, and the way she continues to organize for the land, the water, and the people, against pipelines, and for local sustainable land economies. I'm so honored to be able to introduce her today. Winona LaDuke is an economist, environmental activist, author, hemp farmer, and former two-time Green Party vice presidential candidate. LaDuke's work focuses on rural development, economics, food and energy sovereignty, and environmental justice. She lives and works on the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota and leads several organizations, including Honor the Earth, co-founded with the Indigo Girls 28 years ago, the Anishinaabe Agriculture Institute, and Winona's Hemp, which all work to develop and model cultural-based sustainable development strategies for renewable energy and sustainable food system. She is known worldwide for her thoughts and lectures on climate justice and renewable energy, and as an advocate for protecting indigenous plants and heritage foods from patenting and genetic engineering. We are deeply honored to have her here with us. Hello, Winona LaDuke. I'm handing it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Arnin Indoe Magadaduk, Benesi Queen Jinikas, Makwendo Dam, Gababani Ka, Gish Kaniganing, and Dunjavami Gwich. Thank you very much for the honor of being here with you today. I wish I could be out there with you, but I'm here accompanying my mother, Betty LaDuke, on her 90th birthday and her art opening at a museum in Corvallis, Oregon. And so I'm happy to join you in this virtual way. I want to talk about being a water protector in this moment in time that we live in, a moment of catastrophes of biblical proportions, which surround us, a moment where a pandemic has changed and transformed our world. And I think about what the prophecies of my ancestors and the indigenous people have been. I remember as a young woman hearing the prophecy of the time of the seventh fire, where we were told that we had to make a choice between two paths, one path well-worn and scorched, and the other path green. And that would be our choice in this time. That is this time now. A time to, and it's not just a prophecy, I think, for the Anishinaabe people. I think it's a prophecy for all of us. What are we going to do? How are we going to live? We can see the scorched path and we can see the green path. Old people in my life, I have a lot of privilege. I spent a lot of time with a lot of elders, and my father used to talk about the time when there would be no food in the store. I didn't think I'd see that, but I just did during the pandemic. And elders from the Hopi Nation used to tell us of a time when the new world would come, signified by a web in the sky. That's what they said. I remember hearing that in the 1980s and trying to understand what a web in the sky was. And here we are, the World Wide Web. So what I'm saying is that this is a time of epic moment in time. Arundhati Roy, the Indian writer, refers to pandemic as portal. She says, in the history of the world, pandemics have forced societies to change. This one is no different. It is a portal between one world and the next. She asks, what are we going to take through the portal? Are we going to take our avarice, our hatred, our dirty rivers, and our data banks? Or are we going to walk through clean? That's this moment. This is this moment to be a water protector. This is this moment to do something great. This is this moment that we live in, the time of prophecies. So I'm going to show you some slides, some pictures of our work at our community, and ask you to join us in this time where we step up with all our courage and our good hearts and good minds and make a difference. This woman is a water protector. painted just after Standing Rock in downtown Duluth. This is an Indigenous woman, not missing or murdered. She is about 30 feet wide and 40 feet high. And she is on 2nd Street and 2nd Avenue in downtown Duluth, and she's a water protector. That's what I am. This is where I live. This is my grandson, Ande Guns Neeland, and I out harvesting wild rice 2 years ago on Shell Lake, most sacred food of our people. And for 10,000 years, we have harvested on the same lake. All you had to do was to take care of the water. All you have to do is put your prayers out and be grateful. And each year, the wild rice will come in succession. This is our wild rice in my territory. This is Lower Rice Lake. That is Don Goodwin and myself, another water protector. And what you're looking at is wild rice. That is not a pasture. That is wild rice. And so the territory that I live in, Anishinaabe King or Inda King Amin, the very land to which we belong, is a land that is half water and half land. And on that land, we have responsibilities to care for this life the Creator gave us. So let me talk a little bit about that and where we come from and where we're going. This is a slide I call the Keeping America Great slide, which is Minwainja back in the day, not so long ago, there was tremendous agrobiodiversity. And agrobiodiversity of this year's corn varieties, 10,000 varieties of corn developed by people who look just like me, people and the Creator and the corn itself. And that is one of the ways that we have survived and fed ourselves for thousands of years, is with the preservation of agrobiodiversity. Because you don't want a cultural monocrop, you don't want a biological monocrop. You need biodiversity and you need diversity. Because of the decisions made by industrial society, whether it is in mining or fossil fuels or agriculture, we're in this situation. And most of you, if you're at this lecture, you don't need to know that the disasters are on the increase, because we do live in a time of disasters of biblical proportions. And we don't know, where they're going to be. I just say pray hard and continue on and build some infrastructure for people, not for corporations. And we have a chance to survive. Quit making dumb decisions. So this is some dumb decisions that affect Michigan and Minnesota. This is the Enbridge Corporation. 75% of the tar sands, that's the dirtiest oil in the world, come through Enbridge lines into the United States, 75%. And this corporation has a stranglehold on our Great Lakes. And you can see it right here in their line 3, line 5, 4, 6, Alberta Clipper, all of them. They come through the heartland of our territory, and none of us are oil producers. None of us benefit. We have all the risk, and our water has all of the risk. So for the past 7 years of my life, I've been fighting Enbridge, because I believe that a Canadian multinational should not own our water, should not own our future, should not own our land. And this is the Line 3 pipeline, which we spent 7 years trying to fight. We did succeed in stopping Enbridge from their Sandpiper, which was their precursor to the Line 3 pipeline. That was a fracked oil pipeline they intended to run through Minnesota, but they did not. Instead, we ended up with Line 3. We attended every hearing, didn't miss a beat, and every regulatory process, every legal option we exercised. But this pipeline was put in during a pandemic and the Trump administration. That's how you get a pipeline in. You put it in during a pandemic, during the Trump administration, and you will be ensured that you will violate people's rights and you'll put in a pipeline. So this is Line 3. This is how I spent 2021. In 2021, tens of thousands of people came to northern Minnesota to stand for our water and stand for our Indigenous people and stand for future generations. And 1,000 of us were arrested and charged. Many of us faced a lot of police brutality, and that police brutality was financed by the Enbridge Corporation. That is to say that the state of Minnesota required that Enbridge would pay for the police to put in their pipeline. And so Enbridge did. $8.5 million worth of police paid for by the Enbridge Corporation to conduct surveillance and repression on people like myself, and arrest 1,000 people. 92 separate police forces were involved, compromising everyone from the Highway Patrol to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources in a really avid display of when a foreign corporation controls your military. Something I think is a little problematic, that they let a foreign corporation pay for the militarization of a state. Behold, Michigan, behold, Wisconsin. This is what they're trying to do to you. Now, what is the solution? What is the solution to this? The solution to this is not just to stop Enbridge and oil companies, but the solution is to transform into a way of life where there is potential and there is life. And so I say that because the return is to the green path. And people say to me, we're never going to be able to have enough renewable energy to meet present demand for electricity in the United States. To which I say, why would you want to meet present demand? I'm going to show you this chart here, which you can see, which is 2008, but the same one is even worse in 2017. I don't know why the 2008 is up here. But basically, this is wasted energy. 57% of the energy between point of origin and point of consumption is wasted in the United States. How do we do that? Well, somebody made up an idea that we needed to have big power plants, and big power plants would solve all of our problems. And so they created a bunch of big power plants, and then they had them thousands of miles away from the point of consumption, losing an immense amount of power between point of origin and point of consumption. And then they had some really inefficient systems like tar sands oil. Tar sands oil is the dirtiest oil in the world, and it's really hard to turn into energy. Conventional oil might be a 1-to-4 ratio between what you cost to extract it and what you get out of it. Tar sands is like 4-to-4. It's about the same amount of energy to consume it, to produce it, and it by the time it arrives to the consumer, you lose it. And so the point of this is look, what we need to do is to transform our systems. Anishinaabe people, other people, we might call this a Wendigo economic system, the economics of a cannibal. That is, you take more than you need and you don't leave the rest. You lay to waste villages and ecosystems just so that you can have a profit. That is, in fact, the ecosystem of American capitalism, the way of life of American capitalism. It's a Wendigo economy. One time, a long time ago, I remember talking to this older chief from British Columbia, or what we call British Columbia, colonial British Columbia. And he said, Winona, sitting down and talking to the Canadian government's a lot like sitting down and talking to a cannibal. You can make it as much small talk as you want, but in the end, you know exactly what they're after. Welcome to this day and age, where we in North America, we become addicts. I've lived my entire life in the fossil fuel system, as have all of you. Drive-in movies, had some flowers delivered from Colombia 2 days before picked, or 2 days after they were picked. Sometimes even got that Fiji water because I wanted to see what water would taste like that had an 8,000-mile radius to get the water. So we become accustomed to this level of kind of a jacked up energy society. And in that, not only are we wasteful, but our entitlement has caused us addictions. And the problem with addicts is that they make bad decisions. And so bad decisions cause us to destroy ecosystems, and bad decisions cause us to contaminate our water. And bad decisions cause us to destroy the life around us that we know it. And I don't think addicts should make decisions. I think that we need to sober up and begin to transition to something that is beautiful and that is restorative. So let me talk about that. I call this the Sitting Bull plan. That's to say, I've spent my whole life fighting stupid ideas. I don't even know where to start. Coal strip mines, mega dam projects, coal-fired power plants, coal gasification plants, pipelines, Keystone Pipeline. Remember, they wanted to have 5 tar sands pipelines about 5 years ago. The proposal was for 5 tar sands pipelines, one called Energy East across Canada, the Keystone, Enbridge Line 3, the Northern Gateway, that was another Enbridge pipeline, and the we call it Trudeau West, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Of those pipelines, the only one that is proceeded is Enbridge's Line 3. The ideas are endless, and what we need is a way out. And so I want a graceful transition out of the fossil fuel era. I want a graceful transition back to a way which reaffirms relationship to water, reaffirms relationship to life, and rebuilds an economy which is really an indigenous economy based on the waters and lands of this beautiful territory that we share, a place where you can get food from the water and sugar from a tree. That's a pretty good deal. So, Sitting Bull plan. Sometimes they call it the Green New Deal. Canada, they call it the Green Manifesto. I call it the Sitting Bull plan. It was like the Marshall Plan, but Sitting Bull. I was a great political leader of the Hunkpapa Lakota, philosopher, political leader assassinated by the US government. But Sitting Bull said, let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. Let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. And that's what we need. We don't need, no one's going to save us. There's not like some messiah going to come. There's not like Elon Musk is not going to solve the world's problems. It's all of us. Put our minds together and make a difference. So let me tell you about our story. First, we start with return of agrobiodiversity, the return of our plants and our seeds. I like this Mexican proverb. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. That is us. We are seeds of resistance. We are seeds of life. In my own territory, there is a great seed, Menomen, the wondrous seed, and that seed, the seed of the spirit, that wild rice, that seed. In some lakes, they have flooded us out. There's one lake called Onamia Lake, another lake, Ogeechee Lake. And those two lakes, one of them didn't have wild rice on it for 50 years, and another one didn't have wild rice on it for 17 years, flooded out by non-Indians who wanted high water levels for their big boats on the lakes. Each year, the Ojibwe would say, we would like the water levels lower so that our rice can return. Each year they would say that, and of no avail. And then one day there was a drought, and in that drought was surfaced out of the drought after 17 years, and another place after 50 years was Menomen, or wild rice. That is to say, if you give life a chance, it will come back. Believe in the seeds. They remember what they're supposed to do. So here are some seeds that we have planted in Minnesota. These are seeds of hemp. This is a fiber hemp crop. This is my family, or some of my family, that is reflected here. Companion, sons, nephews, friends. This is 2016 hemp crop on the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota. Now, you can't get high from this. Can't get high. I know if they're in Michigan, you've legalized cannabis, but not in Minnesota. And I have been growing this for 7 years with federal permits and state permits to grow this. And what I'm interested in is fiber hemp. That's what this is, fiber hemp. Why am I interested in fiber hemp? Because I see that fiber hemp is, we call it the new green revolution. And why do I do that? Because think of this. Consider that the word canvas comes from cannabis. The word canvas comes from cannabis. In other words, a lot of things in the material economy could come directly from hemp. They said that at one point we had a choice between a carbohydrate economy and a hydrocarbon economy. A carbohydrate economy and a hydrocarbon economy. Those words are so close. But the carbohydrate economy was hemp. Because whether it is paper, whether it is rebar, whether it is bioplastics, whether it is supercapacitors, whether it is batteries, whether it is clothing, or whether it is housing, hemp can make all of that. And that would totally transform the agricultural systems in the north and in our region. So our interest is in growing this next economy, understanding that in that we can replace a fossil fuels economy with a green economy. And hemp in itself bioremediates the soil. That's to say that as high as the plant is, as deep as its roots go, hemp sequesters carbon at a rate higher than any other row crop, which is exactly what we need. And it also sucks out of the soil heavy metals through bioremediation. Here's some more slides on hempcrete. So we call it the new green revolution. And we call it the new green revolution because what we understand is that the last revolution, the green revolution, was brought to us by the University of Minnesota, Norman Borlaug. They call him the father of the green revolution. And with him came all kinds of industrial ag, pummeling our land, all kinds of toxins, pummeling our land, all kind of capital and money and consolidation, so that today there's 1 out of 1,000 people is a farmer. When I was a child, maybe 1 out of 10 was a farmer. The world has changed, and what we need to do is to return to what is healthy. So here's a couple of pictures of grannies over on the Tuscarora Reservation with some of their ancient corn crop that they have returned to their village and recovering their seeds and making something which is new and beautiful for the families. Because a lot of us, as I showed at the beginning, The agrobiodiversity that existed in our communities is something that needs to return. For those of us in this time of climate chaos, I will tell you this. My corn crop, even this year, it came. It came. I was worried because I had to plant it twice because it was so cold. It would not germinate. But in the end, my corn came. Monsanto varieties did not come. Last year, in the deepest drought in the history of the state, when the state of Minnesota elected to give 5 billion gallons of water to the Enbridge Corporation, we did not. We did not, we did not think we would get corn, but we got corn. We also got arrested, but we got corn. So this is another part of the solution, which is local energy. So the Eighth Fire Solar is work that we do in my community. I like to talk about what we do because my theory is if we could do it, anybody could do it. So Eighth Fire Solar is based on our prophecies that in the time of the seventh fire, if you make the choice to the green path, you will light the eighth fire. And that is the fire of reconciliation and balance. That is this fire. So here is some of our solar thermal panels being installed on houses. That's what we're doing. Now, why I'm talking to you about this is because a lot of you are in Michigan, which is just as cold or maybe not as cold as Minnesota. But look, in the wintertime, Minnesota is cold as could be, but sunny as could be. And so what are you going to do to heat your houses in times of fuel poverty? As we sit here and we look at our villages and the infrastructure of fossil fuels and everything else crumbling in front of us, we see that many of our people face tremendous fuel poverty in the winter as they cross their fingers, and hope that they will make it through this winter as they did through last winter. Solar thermal is a way to heat your house. Put one of those panels on. You see one right there, which we made. That panel, you install it on the south-facing wall, and it could save 20 to 40% of your heating bill in your house. Sun radiates on it, gets warm inside that block that's about this big. You can see it. When it gets warm in there, thermostat goes on and tells you that and turns on a blower fan, which blows hot air into your house. So that's what we do in my community. There's one of my sons here on the left building a solar thermal panel at our facility. And then there's one really small village way up in the far north, and their little house is warm, and those little kids, I don't know why they're outside without enough clothes on, but I guess it's a little bit later in the year, but they're happy because they're warm. And then this is, if you're really cool, you get to do stuff like this, which is the Red Lake Nation in northern Minnesota, where that's a solar project. Local solar that powers their tribal headquarters. That's the tribal headquarters of the Red Lake Nation. So why am I showing you these pictures? Because the solutions of how you protect the water, the solutions of how you protect life are in our hands. A set of choices to, first of all, live more wisely, not be jerks and consume like cannibals, pretty much. And then get local and efficient in our behavior through food, local food, organic food, through local energy, through transforming these systems so that they are systems of life instead of systems of crazy. So, the last things I want to talk about briefly here are the stories of water themselves. This is the great Emoto, Dr. Emoto from Japan, who studied water crystals. And what he found was that he said the same thing that Anishinaabe people and all people who are coherent say, which is water is life. Water is life. In Minnesota, we were arrested for saying water is life. But water is life and water is alive. So what he has here is these pictures he took of water crystals, which I never really thought about until I saw these photos, which is that each crystal is different. Each water crystal is different. And, in some places, like in the far upper left, you can see a beautiful water, the top ones are beautiful water crystals, which are entirely symmetrical or unique, just delicate. And then what you see is that's the footprint, that's the print of a crystal. And then you see what happens in the contamination of water from toxins, from, Teflon or oil. You see that the water is not happy. It is sick. It is not well. It is not in balance. And then you see in the bottom picture, you see if you pray, if you honor, if you work, you can recover your water. You can recover the sacredness of your relationship with water. So when I saw these pictures, it reaffirmed our indigenous teachings and knowledge. indigenous teachings of knowledge on how water is alive and how our lives are indeed, we're 70% water, but that the power of prayer, the power of good intent and good actions can transform what we know from what is to what should be. And it is, those practices which are individual practices of spirituality, collective practices of spirituality, and group practices of transforming systems, because the truth is that take pipes. I'm not opposed to pipes. I like water pipes, not whale pipelines. And in this country itself, about 50% of the water doesn't get to the water faucet. That is to say that the infrastructure in most of our cities is so crumbling that water leaks in every water main. And what we need to do is to be more efficient in our use of anything. But in addition to that, we need to be the people who have working infrastructure for people and not for energy corporations. This is a picture of Evo Morales, who was the former president of Bolivia for a number of years until he was ousted in Elon Musk's lithium coup, as it was known. He has returned. He is not a president, but he is a senior person in the government of Bolivia. And why his picture is up here is that in 2010, I believe it was, Bolivia was the first country to declare the rights of nature as a part of the constitution of that country. The rights of Pachamama, the rights of nature to exist, to Mother Earth to exist, to continue without contamination, without genetic engineering, to continue as a life form, installed in the Bolivian Constitution. An indigenous leader, mind you. Other indigenous leaders followed from from Ecuador, also declaring the rights of nature. And then in New Zealand, the rights of a river were declared, as the river would have a right to continue its existence. And then the rights of other rivers, I think the Ganges was declared. In 2019, the White Earth Nation, my own tribe, declared the rights of wild rice, saying that wild rice had a right to exist in perpetuity, without contamination, without genetic engineering. The rights of a river were declared by the Klamath Nation, for the Klamath River by the Yurok Nation, referring to the rights of that river. The Snake River, the Nez Perce, said the same thing. So what am I saying? That at a certain point, the institutions that we have come to consider as normal in the United States, we find that the systems are failing. I don't know who is there in the audience, but I've seen a failure of the executive branch with the insurrection. I've seen a failure of the legislative branch repeatedly in every facet of state and federal government. And then I have seen a total failure of the judicial branch of the United States government, particularly with the most recent Supreme Court appointments. And foundationally, much of the systems of the United States are based on British common law, where we find has evolved to the fact that it has evolved to the state in the world where the rights of corporations supersede the rights of people. That is to say that a corporation is considered a natural person under the law, and they have rights which have protected them and been the source of the oppression and destruction, not only of ecosystems, but the lives of water protectors who have stood against these corporations at Standing Rock, have stood against these corporations in Minnesota, and continue on a worldwide scale to stand against the rights of corporations. Many of them in South American countries actually assassinated for their work to protect the rights of Mother Nature, Mother Earth. And so what I am heartened by, this is the Yurok tribe and the rights of the Klamath River behind them. I'm heartened by the transition in legal institutions in the world to reflect the rights of Mother Earth over the rights of corporations. The most recent decision, which I found incredibly heartening, was last year in Ecuador, where the Ecuadorian Supreme Constitutional Court ruled that the rights of a Canadian mining corporation and an Ecuadorian mining corporation did not supersede the rights of nature to exist in a protected area, and upheld the rights of nature in the court system of Ecuador. So I say that to you because our work as water protectors is deep. It must be deep enough to protect our water on the front lines of northern Minnesota and on the front lines in Michigan, where the Enbridge Corporation is trying in its last stages of fossil fuel economics, the last phase of the party, as we know that tar sands oil, the dirtiest oil in the world, is no longer desired, not only by us, but as investors flee the tar sands in a time of climate chaos. I say, let us stand strong on the front lines. Let us continue to stand strong in the economics of the transition to a green and just economy. And let us transform our legal systems so that the rights of Mother Earth can supersede the rights of nature, can supersede the rights of corporations. The rights of Mother Earth can supersede the rights of corporations. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm happy to open up for some questions as you like. And thank you for allowing me to speak with you today, Miigwech. I can't hear you, my dear. Yeah, put your microphone on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Winona. That was lots of ideas, very inspiring talk. My name is Shramoy Mitra. I'm the director of Stamps Gallery, and I have the honor to open up the Q&A today. So I'm just going to look through some questions and maybe start with this. I was taking notes as you were talking on so many beautiful ideas, this notion of the seeds of resistance,
Can I ask you guys some questions? So in Minnesota, I have charges in 3 counties because of Enbridge. I was charged as a water protector. I have trespassing charges, critical infrastructure charges, obstruction of justice charges. I have 1 public nuisance charge, which I thought was kind of a low blow, But, just to say that 1,000 people were charged and it was financed by Enbridge, which incentivized the charges. Now, I know that in Wisconsin, Enbridge succeeded in getting an ALEC law passed, which would criminalize everything I did to a felony level, as opposed to a misdemeanor charge. I'm not sure what has happened in Michigan. I'm just sure that, corporations should not run your legal system. But I'm wondering, as we face Line 5 in Michigan, and you've already seen the Kalamazoo spill, so everybody knows the handiwork of the Enbridge Corporation. And we know that in Wisconsin, Enbridge is actually running someone for governor. Tim Michels is one of their single largest contractors, no political experience, but he is the GOP representative, GOP, candidate for the governor of Wisconsin. So I see this like end game in the fossil fuels economy between the evil corporations and the people. And I guess I'm kind of wondering how it's going over there. And we want to stand with you, in Michigan, and want to say this corporation's bad for life. And I'm wondering how severe my charges would be if I come visit you.
Well, I wonder if there's anyone in the audience there who could answer that. I know that I don't have the details on that. I was reading though that recently in Minnesota, the Hubbard County Sheriff, that the court ruled against that the sheriff unlawfully blockading access to the camp. And I wanted to ask what that ruling, what the impact of that ruling would be, or has been. Is it going to sort of help to, I don't know. I think there's also a level of awareness or a level of misinformation. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there in terms of what Enbridge is doing, and gaslighting about how they, with their news, the way they promote themselves and things. But I wondered if that ruling was going to. I believe it's fairly recent in September. If that was going.
It was a recent ruling, and so what had happened is that there were some water protectors who had a camp on private land.
Mm-hmm.
Hubbard County decided that they could not leave their land, and they blockaded them in and said that the access to the camp belonged to Hubbard County and not to the landowner. And so 100 cops barricaded in some water protectors. It was pretty rough, challenging of them. And the court ruled that, in fact, you cannot block people into their land. You can't say it's your land when it's not your land. And so Hubbard County, which is the single largest number of arrests of any county in Minnesota, the deep north, we call it the deep north up here, I was pushed back. And that was a significant ruling in terms of civil rights and your ability to undertake First Amendment activities, moving from your own private land. And so it's been very good. Disturbing. Hubbard County has been very disturbed about it. But, that is kind of the tip of the iceberg. We've had many of the cases dismissed because there was a lack of evidence. They tried to charge a woman with a conspiracy for basically, saying, you should go do what you believe is right. And the court ruled that the state of Minnesota did not actually have a case against her, that a Facebook post that said do what's right was not enough to charge someone. And so we've had case after case and trumped up charges where people they've manufactured evidence. Those have been dropped too. Okay. So water protectors are prevailing in the legal system, although Enbridge got through its line. And so now we are just like on them about every violation, including the fact that they have broken an aquifer and it's leaking and nobody is charged with that. So, I still have charges in 3 counties, but I think Enbridge should be charged. And individuals like me, we should get medals for protecting the waters of Minnesota, and I think that's this time. It's the birth of a movement of consciousness where, we can talk about whatever, just issues we want to, but in the end, you got to drink the water. Yeah. That's one thing we all got to do.
Yeah. Building infrastructures for people and water pipes versus oil. So the other thing that I find stunning is that, the 8 million or 8.5 million that's being, that Enbridge spends on, the policing. So, kind of making it the police, which is supposed to be a public service. And there seems to be no that information is out there. There's no recourse to that.
I think that that came about because the state of North Dakota spent $38 million in the repression of water protectors at Standing Rock. $38 million, and they're still trying to get someone to pay that. In their latest count, they're trying to get the federal government to pay that, and nobody's paying for it. And so Minnesota saw that, and they're like, "Well, we don't want to pay $38 million." But to me, 1, corporations should not own your police. 2, Canadian or foreign corporations should definitely not own your police. And so I think that is really important, and I'm glad I'm having this conversation with people in Michigan because Enbridge represents that it is, Enbridge is a Canadian multinational. When the pipe breaks, they're in Canada. Yeah. And the liability is here. And they don't have enough money, as your governor discovered and Department of Natural Resources. There's not enough money in the accounts of Enbridge in the United States to pay for a catastrophic spill, under the Straits of Mackinac or elsewhere. And so to me, it is a really critical point in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota that this corporation basically has a stranglehold on the Great Lakes and some old pipes. And they're at the end of the party and they need to clean up their mess and go home. That's what they need to do. They need to clean up decommissioning. You want to talk about green jobs? Green jobs, $2 billion to decommission line 3. Decommissioning line 5 is probably like $4 billion, right? That's some green jobs. And you need to get that money out of Enbridge soon, get a decommissioning plan. So, I'm furious at it, but it's just emblematic of late stage fossil fuel addiction to me. When policymakers just say, what do you need, Enbridge? Are you giving us some propane on the UP? What do you need for that? Why don't you put up some solar thermal panels on the UP so that people don't need Enbridge? I think everybody is all ready for not being held hostage by oil companies like me, Well,
it's part of the crumbling of white supremacy, what they're holding out. There is some news here that about Michigan that you had asked, so maybe I can read it out. So on August 18, the state of Michigan lawsuit that aims to force Enbridge Inc. To stop operating Line 5 oil pipeline underneath the Straits of Mackinac will be heard in federal court. A judge ruled on Thursday. So the decision from Judge Janet Neff is a win for the Calgary-based Enbridge.
Yeah, they have not been able to close down
yeah.
the pipe. Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that there's this perception that the world will fall apart if you don't have Enbridge, and we need to like make sure that the world knows that actually what we need is solar and not Enbridge.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more in terms of, as we were talking about decommissioning Enbridge. So how do we, transitioning into a more, to an economy that is more, you gave us obviously ideas and things that you are doing with, wild rice, the hemp, as well as solar energy. Can you share some ideas of, like how do we as consumers people, how do we transition from this end of the fossil fuel for folks? I know we have a number of students as well.
That's our opportunity to make this transformation. I mean, I gave you a couple of examples, but take this idea of solutionary rail. I don't know if anybody's looked at that. I mean, first of all, you got to quit shipping stuff everywhere. You need to localize because you don't need to have any flowers from Colombia on third day mail. You don't need those. And you also don't need Fiji water. Leave the water in Fiji. Make your own water drinkable. That's what I would say. We should be able to drink our water and not have to import water from from any place, right? So the first strategy is really relocalization, which is across the board from food systems to energy systems to transportation systems to, every facet of that is something that we have to do. It's not an abstract concept. It's a very real concept. And then if you're going to transport stuff, do it in a conscientious way. So what is that? That'd be a rail system. Now, the rail system, this is like really critical infrastructure. That's what critical infrastructure is, not oil pipelines. Critical infrastructure is a rail system in this country. So the U.S. rail system is pretty much an embarrassment. Someone said it would be an embarrassment to Bulgaria. I mean, it's like horrible. We have like the most, backwards rail system in the world for being a first world country. So, 1% of our trains are electrified. 67% of the trains in Italy are electrified. Why is that? Because a couple of things. One, why the electric car is going to supersede the gas-powered engine is because an electric vehicle is 65% efficient, and a fossil fuel engine is only 16% efficient. So what do you want to do? You want to ride around in a 16% efficient vehicle, or you want to ride in a 65% efficient vehicle? That's what you want to do. You want to go for the 65. But more than that, what is better than a bunch of cars or a rail? Rail is better for many reasons because it's far more efficient for moving any kind of freight than a tractor-trailer system. But in addition to that, a truck-trailer system, but in addition to that, think about the difference between basic efficiency. What am I saying? Rubber on cement or metal on metal. Oh, that would be metal on metal. So something called solutionary rail envisions a rebuilding of a rail system in the United States, in Canada, which is electric, and it is powered by renewables through a direct current. That's what you need. That's what you need is an electric rail system to transport things. And that's called solutionary rail. There's a whole bunch of guys working on it. So my point is that each system, each facet of the system has an answer. And it's not rocket science, and it's certainly not Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos from Amazon going to the moon. It is really systems that are super practical that require a massive, as I said, the Sitting Bull plan, a massive transition, which helps us move into the way that we need to live, in the society that we live in today. I feel like our work's cut out for us. Fight the bad guys and make the best solutions. And the solutions are there. And in that, you create a just and equitable system because, after all, rebuilding, the infrastructure of water in Michigan, oh my gosh, seems like you guys just have endless problems with that. That's a huge amount of jobs.
Huge.
That's a huge amount of jobs, right? Green jobs.
All right. So I'm going to now move on. There are lots of questions. There's a comment from Michael, and he says, comment on, I was arrested in Hubbard County doing direct action, 1 year probation and public nuisance charge. Tried to get into Canada over the summer. The charge translated to being banned from Canada for 10 years. So,
wow, I didn't know that. You should send us an email at Winona LaDuke at honorearth.org. We should work on getting the rest of those charges gone because that's ridiculous. Yeah, and Michael, if you're a resident in Hubbard County, you'll be pleased to know that we just purchased the we're taking possession, purchase agreement signed, former Enbridge office, downtown Park Rapids. We are purchasing it. We are turning it into a museum of treaty and civil rights. You can come back and visit us, and it'll be beautiful. You'll be welcome back. We're having a big gathering on Day of the Dead, which is the day we take possession of it, and a ceremony and a celebration of death and rebirth. And then this spring, we're going to reopen. So come back to Hubbard County. It's your county.
Wow. Amazing. So another question. Okay. So a question from Alana. Do you have any examples that we can emulate of changing the mind of a person who initially opposed to one of your goals?
Just keep at them. Stupidity is kind of hard to unseat. I didn't say that. But my point is like, show them the example, live the life. I got all kind of haters, as you can imagine, in northern Minnesota. But at the same time, I got all kind of people that are like, you're probably right. A lot of them, they have relinquished their power. Mm-hmm. And you got to help them find their power, and keep yours. And just say, this is how you make a change. Change is inevitable. Change is inevitable. It's a question of who controls the change, right?
Yeah.
And we aren't going to control every facet of the change, but we will control some of it, particularly if we put our hearts and minds and hard work into it.
All right. Another one is, what is one thing right now that the U.S. government could do to change the trajectory in respect to the environment and specifically to our waterways? I think you spoke to something.
Build some pipes, fix our water infrastructure in this country and quit giving Canadian corporations new pipelines. Focus on pipes for people.
Pipes for people, yes.
Not for Canadians. Canadian pipeline companies, right? Those one thing questions is kind of always hard, I mean,
yeah. There's
probably a few things, but we'll go with just, for the sake of today, fix some water pipes and quit giving Canadian corporations more pipes.
So this question is, I think, an important one is, what can allies of water protectors do to help sustain the work of water protectors and protect water?
There is, whether it is Flow or whoever the local organization is in your territory, support them and support work nationally, in this same arena. I mean, because people in Mississippi need water too, right? I mean, remember that, this is the work of all of us. And then remember what we're doing, because people, I'm seeing the birth and growth as prophesized of a movement that sees that water is life and that the center of our life is water. And we want to live in a world that reaffirms that relationship. And so be in that movement, know that movement exists, whether it is in the rights of nature and the rights of rivers, or it is in your own, choices on what you consume.
Okay, another one is, how do you always find a way to bring yourself out of those moments when it feels like the injustices are just too vast and too many?
I live a great life. I live with a fifth of the world's water. I live where you can get sugar from a tree and food from a lake. I, farm. I see birth and hope in seeds. And I am privileged to live with a large amount of my family. And I see my next generation coming. I see that my 401k isn't going to be worth anything, but my grandchildren will know how to farm.
That's amazing. Okay, then this is... Okay, I'll read the question, and it says, do you believe that Indigenous knowledge can or should be incorporated into public policy? And maybe I can add, how can it be, or can it?
Well, I mean, I believe fundamentally the rights of nature is Indigenous knowledge, in our legal system and our regulatory system. But, it is certainly clear that, the only people that have any experience of living here sustainably are Indigenous people. The United States has no, 200 years, 47% of the lakes in Minnesota are gone. The trees, you used to be able to drink, like back when America was great, you could drink the water from every river and stream. That's when America was great, right? Before the mass extinctions. Buffalo is not an extinction. That was just like public policy, wipe them out. So what we know is that in Australia with the massive fires and in Northern California, indigenous burns would have saved a lot of the land, and where indigenous burning systems were used, there was far less damage in the fires that are created in a time of climate change. We know that, indigenous water management systems of wild rice and fish, knowing, first of all, how to care for waterways, and then, how to harvest in a sustainable manner. Those are practices that repeatedly illustrate how you need to take care of an ecosystem. We know that the harvestings, like, for instance, you're in Michigan. One time this older Indian man said, when are we going to start? How come we don't burn for blueberries anymore? I hadn't really thought about that, but traditional burn management is how you get blueberries. A lot of plants come with burning. And so if you want to learn how to live in a sustainable manner, those are the teachings that you will find. And there's nothing to be afraid of. I had all that stuff, Western management systems, shoved down my throat, and what I see is that they don't work. They don't work. So
take the first step.
Yeah, just go. It's okay. What do you got to lose?
So the next question is, when do you remember the first understanding or recognizing the important role of water in your life?
I think, my whole life. I don't know. I always had a pretty good recognition, and we have ceremonies, water ceremonies we hold. I've been to a lot of those, and then I've also lived in places where there's no water. I tell my grandchildren that as you look at a lake and you see a sparkle on a lake, that's called Wasabik. It's a sparkle of the water on the lake. My granddaughter's named Wasabik. Like, some of the world doesn't see that. They don't see a sparkle of water. They don't know what that looks like. And I think that, as we look at in a world that has water scarcity because of these decisions, the Loire River in France is dry for the first time in written history. Then, people begin to realize that what we take for granted is really life.
Can you talk a little bit about narratives and stories instead of keeping, I'm sorry, I started thinking about that in relation to this idea of memory and what we remember and the intergenerational knowledge. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of narratives or storytelling or stories in making this transition maybe to a more...
Right now, I'm in one of, I've had a great amount of privilege in my life, and I have fewer winters ahead of me than behind me. I'm 63 years old. I've seen a great deal in this world, and I appreciate, the things that I have learned. And, so right now, it's super interesting to me that the Carnegie Library is what we are purchasing in downtown Park Rapids, Minnesota. And I think about that because, we have oral history, but Andrew Carnegie was at one point in history the richest man in the world. And he made his money off of our iron ore, off of my people. And, the story that is told in Minnesota is that Paul Bunyan took all that, iron ore. Paul Bunyan cut all those trees. Paul Bunyan dammed all those rivers. Paul Bunyan is a narrative fiction created to eliminate the responsibility of those who pillaged the Great North. But this mythological creature, Paul Bunyan, with his blue ox, is the guy who really did it. I have no responsibility for what happened. right? But it was really Andrew Carnegie who did all that. And then Andrew Carnegie in 1901, I believe, retired and decided that he was going to give away his money or some of it in kind of a, do good way as a philanthropist. And so he made 2,500 libraries. I don't know if you've ever seen a Carnegie library, but they all look almost the same.
Yeah.
And they're all around the country. And they would put them in rural communities so that poor kids, like Andrew Carnegie once was, could go to the library. I'm a product of a Carnegie library. I spent a lot of time in my youth in a Carnegie library because I was a kid who wanted a library, and in my school, I mean, it's where I found myself, in my library, right? And so the idea that the Carnegie libraries would turn into places where the Enbridge Corporation could then take up, it's just so problematic to me. And so when the opportunity came up to purchase the former Carnegie Library and tell our story, I said, let us do that. Let us tell the story of the North. Let us tell the story of the people and the land and the water. And let us tell the story of how these libraries were built and how empire was really built. And then let us make a narrative which shows the stories that prophesize where we are to go. And so that is at the age of 64, I'll be starting that project. I'm very excited about it, as you can tell. Can you tell that?
Yeah.
The Carnegie Library, right? And so if you look at Honor the Earth, you can see our work on it. I think we're just putting it up on the website. But my point is that you must, if you have a way, you must just take the story. You must tell your story, and we know that the story is that a consciousness has come. And how you know that is that, never in my life did I think that 44 statues of Columbus would fall in a single year, right? I mean, with the Black Lives Matter movement, the uprising against the oppressors was stark. Oñate conquistadors tipped their statues were toppled, and never in my lifetime, as Columbus Day comes on Monday, never in my lifetime did I believe that there would be a time when I would see those statues fall. And so, take your story and tell your story. That's what I would say to people. And now is our time to tell our story, and also to tell the story that is to come.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Winona. It has been so inspiring. Thank you so much. I think with that, we will, I think we're at time. I want to once again really thank you so much for your time and joining us. Maybe we could just share one more time, Honor the Earth, the website.
HonorEarth.org.
www.honorearth.org.
www.honorearth.org.
And that's where we can find out about the new library that will be coming up.
The Center for Decolonization.
And
you should come visit. It's going to be great.
Yes, I will. I will be very honored to do that.
Thank you so much for having me, all of you, and really the best to you. And you let me know. I'll come and stand with you and exercise my First Amendment rights out there in Michigan, because that's what we need to do, is stand together. So I'm with you. All the water protectors, I'm with you.
Thank you again for a really inspiring talk. Let's all stand together. And everyone at the audience, in the auditorium, thank you. I think we will take a short break, and we will come back with the panel starting at 3:30.
Miigwech.
Very much. Miigwech. Bye-bye.